Sports Pundit now kind of evolves into a podcast network with different hosts that specialize across the different domains.
There's a ton of ripe ideas to essentially just talk about.
Hello and welcome to the Sports Pundit Podcast, the show for people shaping the future of sport. Driven by my curiosity working in the industry, I've brought together leading executives to host conversations with decision makers across innovation, marketing, media, finance, and performance, unpacking their strategies and industry-shaping ideas.
We can say that this is an idea that we've been pitching to each other.
Okay, so where to start? I mean, the pitch in its infancy was from you and I going back and forth on WhatsApp a lot about ideas and conversations about the sports industry and doing things slightly differently. And both you and I think we bonded very quickly over the idea that there's a ton of ripe ideas to essentially just talk about, which hopefully the Pitch Pod becomes a space in a bit more formal of a sense to do just that. So I'm super grateful that you've asked me to co-host. I think it's going to be really fun and an awesome compliment to the entire Sports Pundit Network, which I'm sure you'll get into in a second. But at its core, I hope this show represents a space for ideas and discussion and open-minded thinking where there is no bad idea. We are coming at it from a place of relative information and public information, but by no means are we ever going to be the absolute experts on something. And I hope that in general, all of our ideas that we discuss blossom outside of this virtual room and they just continue to be iterated on and talked about. And what I really, really want to get out of this is for you and I to have wonderful conversations and think about new things and talk about new ideas.
Yeah, no, I think that you've nailed it there in terms of the positioning for the pitch. Like from my perspective, having done the interviews with the Sports Pundit podcast, I think there's a really good place for them in terms of you're speaking to people that are talking about a complete idea or something that has come to fruition and has been completed. But there's obviously a ton of other stuff that's like swirling around people's minds that maybe isn't yet quite so complete, and ultimately like discussing things before they get to that point of final completion is sometimes potentially more interesting and could potentially be more applicable, I guess, to a wider audience who can take what they want from that and apply it in their own way, rather than like just seeing an end result of someone that's succeeded in whatever space it is. And I also think that the sort of secondary part to this is like, as Sports Pundit now kind of evolves into a podcast network with different kind of hosts that specialize across the different domains. So obviously what was previously visible was obviously I launched the innovation podcast with Leanne and then the performance podcast with Rich. And that will now expand to have media with Joe and Michael, marketing with Jamie and Charlie, and finance with Vansa, some of whom have been on the podcast already and some who will get interviewed kind of across the series. But also I think when you're the host of the podcast, it's hard to get across your ideas or the things that you're working on. So having this space where we can invite them in to actually discuss things or ideas that have been sparked when they've had interviews previously, like I think it would just be a really interesting space to have that kind of like higher level conversation around where different themes or trends or insights kind of intersect.
I think there's a really, really fun opportunity within the wonderful network of shows that you've launched and are launching for a more casual conversation space. And I'm super excited.
Yeah. I mean, you know all about podcasts, obviously, and do the super high-end production in the studio. But I think one opportunity that we have with this network is to kind of lean into the remoteness of it as actually a strength, because it allows us to be truly global in terms of right now recording this conversation between the UK and the US, but having hosts that spend time in Thailand, New Zealand, Switzerland, the US, as well as obviously the UK. So I think, having that kind of geographic spread means hopefully we're touching on things from a global perspective and not just kind of within our own bubble or own sort of silo.
Totally. Do you want to lead us off with our first ever pitch?
So The main idea that's kind of been floating around my head this week, and it will be a few weeks since this got announced by the time this goes live, is the Formula One Business Summit in Las Vegas. So Formula One have announced that there's going to be a conference on the Thursday ahead of the Las Vegas Grand Prix. They've got executives from Formula One, as you'd expect, from Liberty, from the Las Vegas Commission, from Disney, from LVMH, I think, from a number of their other partners. And I just think it's a really clever way to leverage existing infrastructure that they already have for the Grand Prix, leverage executive availability, as they're probably all at the event anyway, and also to extend programming beyond the kind of 3-day window that Formula One kind of owns, which is Friday through Sunday, and predominantly Saturday and Sunday, right? Like, I think the sprint races that they've previously launched have enabled that Friday to become more valuable, because when a sprint race happens, qualifying moves to the Friday, and suddenly the Friday becomes more interesting. Having been to only one Grand Prix live, it doesn't feel worth the trek out to the Grand Prix. I know it's slightly different with Vegas because it's in the city, but for the one I went to, which was in Budapest, or outside Budapest at the Hungaroring, like, we went to the Friday and then we're like, do we really want to just see cars drive around in circles again all day tomorrow and then on Sunday? So we didn't go on the Saturday, we just like stayed in the city. So I think like creating other kind of reasons to engage around the event is interesting, which is why when they announced this conference, I thought like there's something to this in terms of extending programming. They also announced, and this is obviously ultra premium because it's F1 and it's in Vegas, but there's a golf pro-am on the Wednesday. I think it's like $12,000 for a ticket or something, but there's this like golf pro-am on the Wednesday. So arguably you could have like a high net worth individual's attention from Wednesday through Sunday if you're F1 or a partner of F1. So I can see why that's valuable to them. And so my pitch, I guess, would be that more sports organizations, particularly global touring ones, should create additional inventory alongside the sporting event. And that could be a conference, but it could also be partnering with another sports event, right? So the Australian Open host a paddle event during the Australian Open. Or if it's not a sports business conference, like maybe one of your key partners is a tech company and they host a tech summit every year. Like, why not host that at the sporting event and drive traffic to the sporting event that was there because they were going to the tech summit, and suddenly that summit is completely differentiated from every other summit in that industry or space. Or if you're a real small challenger league, then I think the opportunity is like you need awareness from broadcasters or sponsors. If you launch a conference or partner with a conference provider because maybe you don't have the network, you could potentially then, I don't know, launch a sports broadcasting conference, host it at your event so that people do the conference, and then in the evening, the sporting event that you're hosting is on. Most people are going to stay and watch. They now have visibility into your sport they didn't have before. And then when you're having conversations about a new broadcast deal or a new sponsorship deal, they now have like visible and physical awareness of your product that they wouldn't have previously had. So I just think there's a lot of opportunities to take back ownership of some of the conference space, because at the moment it's all owned by a few big conference organizers. And I don't necessarily think that this would have to replace them, but like it could be in partnership with them, because they'll often do an event and they'll just be using a sports venue, but there won't actually be any sport happening. So you don't actually need the venue, if that makes sense.
When you say it like that, it's kind of crazy that I've never been, I'm sure there are, but I've never been to a conference that is ahead of a baseball game or something, for example. Like a sports industry conference is usually bookmarked by a happy hour in the convention center when there are so many open and ample opportunities to integrate the sports that we're talking about there.
Yeah, like a good example is like a lot of conferences happen at the Oval in London, which is a cricket stadium, right? And like there's obvious pushback, I guess, for some sporting events where it's really busy, where you wouldn't necessarily want the added security headache of having to monitor a conference as well as a sports event. But like for, let's say, a county championship game, which is like a 4-day cricket match that happens midweek, there's about 500 people in the ground, probably, maybe less. Like, it's completely dead because everyone's at work.
Begs the question, why is it a 4-day game during the week?
Because it's when else they're going to play it. They put the short format games on in the evenings and on the weekend slots. But if there's a cricket match happening, for example, like, why could that not be happening at the same time as you also hosting a conference at the Oval? Or to your point, like, it could be straight afterwards, right? Like, it could be a way to get people into the stadium or into the venue.
I think it's really interesting. It's also kind of interesting you were talking about awareness, but it's not very top of funnel, like audience awareness. It's almost like B2B awareness. Sponsor, media rights, execs. There's a very different type of need there, but like tying a tour-based model with like a B2B event model is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and obviously that's not the case with like F1, right? Like they're not short of awareness, but you could apply it to a sport that does need awareness, right? Like, I think about like triathlon, for example. Like a lot of the sponsors are endemic. They have some broadcast deals, but not many, and usually the business model isn't based around the broadcast deal. Like, it's an opportunity to potentially drive people there. They do quite a good job, both SuperTri and PTO, and probably Ironman too, but I'm not as familiar with the Ironman business, at creating like participation events around the event itself. Like, they'll quite often host participation events, but I think that there's other events that you could be hosting, right? Because like, there's not everyone that maybe wants to attend wants to also participate in a triathlon. Like, they might want to be at a conference, or there might be some other entertainment that could be happening that could be driving them to be there. So, with this idea, like, I think it works really well for like the ATP Tour or Live Golf or any sport that's sort of a global touring sport. Yeah. I think it'd be much harder to do if you're a sports team, like if you're Arsenal or Chelsea or Spurs or something, and you've got a Premier League match. I think hosting a conference before it's probably not that plausible. Like, and also like doesn't really fit. Like, you don't really need the awareness piece. Your match is quite short anyway. I think it could maybe work on the women's side, to be fair, like, because you're trying to drive maybe different audiences to be in the ground. And there's maybe not quite as much demand in the hospitality boxes as there would be on the men's games. And there could potentially be an overlap of subject matter in terms of like the business of women's sport followed by a women's football match.
Totally.
I think it could potentially work then. But I think obviously the opportunity that F1 has is much broader because they are the authority on the sport. So they can talk about the business of F1, like the business of the entire sport. Whereas how much value can you get out of a conference if it's the business of football and it's just Chelsea execs or just Tottenham execs hosting their own business of sports summit, right? Like, it's going to essentially just be them promoting all of their own internal initiatives.
Yeah.
So you do need a way of kind of getting a broad enough set of speakers, which I think is where a club would struggle.
Yeah, definitely. Feels very forward for a league. It's kind of like the external version of when I was working in Major League Soccer, the draft in early January, or I think it was February, you'd have a bunch of league meetings around that city setup. And it's basically just creating that in an external way, which could be cool.
This podcast is produced by O6, but more than just being a production partner, they're also active members of the Sports Pundit community. Having seen the work they're doing across the industry up close, working with leading F1 teams and Premier League clubs, as well as top creators, I'm so delighted to now have them on board and helping to elevate this show to a new level.
It's kind of a good segue because mine was somewhat similar. So I was reading, do you know Will Ventures, their Substack?
Yeah.
Pretty solid. I love reading it. And I've been toying around with this idea and like talking to a few friends about this for a while, but they had a post relatively recently, I think it was like a few weeks back, around travel in the sports industry. And one line really stuck out to me, which is if you take the Super Bowl, the Chiefs and the Eagles played in New Orleans this past Super Bowl last February.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the millions of economic activity that went into New Orleans, those two teams see such a minute fraction of that. And there's obviously good reason for a lot of things, like a team isn't going to be owning an airline, et cetera, or a hotel brand, whatever. But there seems to be such a gap, and I'm sure there's good reasons, of course, but creating a way for teams or leagues to capture more of the economics around their biggest events feels like a huge opportunity. And then that could blossom into a conversation more than an hour long, I'm sure. So then something I was also thinking about was what if there's more team-based level travel? Like, for example, I'm biased because I don't think Kansas City or maybe Philly this could work, but like a tour where you go and try the best Philly cheesesteaks, you get a ticket to the game. It's like the hospitality packages that a bunch of these third-party hospitality agencies do, but run by the team itself to get a larger share of essentially sports tourism. So that this has obviously been talked about a lot, but it was something that I read that article and I was just thinking about it a ton. Of obviously we all talk about how fractured like the sports consumer landscape is across media, marketing, ticket sales, merch, etc., concessions. But sports as tourism feels like something we could spend another hour on.
It's funny you say that because I was having a conversation with someone yesterday. They were talking about their experience. They're a Spurs fan, like me, but they went to Bilbao for the Europa League final, and they flew to Bordeaux and then hired a car and drove to the stadium. And once they got there, like they were like the perimeter boards were all Booking.com and Europcar, but I didn't use Booking.com or Europcar, and I had no one ever at any point in my journey of planning this trip like direct me to either of those organizations for my travel, right? And obviously there's other initiatives and like objectives that are probably broader from Europcar and Booking.com's perspective in terms of like mass awareness and visibility and all of the signage and everything else they're getting with the thing. And the last point of interest for them is probably like the 60,000 people that are actually in the stadium. But it's a real like tangible use case, right, for both of those brands. And so yeah, stealing his idea completely. He was like, why wouldn't like they know the venue well in advance of the teams, so why not have like a grace period or like a period of exclusivity where you can only book through Booking.com in Bilbao for a certain amount of time before it becomes kind of before you can book, or a certain amount of hotel rooms are reserved to only be booked through that platform, something like that. Like they know enough in advance that they could come up with some sort of agreement like that, which I think is interesting. The other way that I've thought about it previously was a couple years back. I went to an Inter Milan match with my dad because we got tickets to go to a Champions League game for €30.
Nuts.
So obviously the tickets were €30. So Inter Milan sees €60. That's like what they get out of it. But we also booked flights to Milan. We booked a hotel. Like we spent the day in Milan, and they didn't get any of that spend, right? So we probably spent a lot more on those things than on the ticket. Yet the ticket was what drove us to be there in the first place. So there should be, and I don't know what the answer is exactly, but there should be some way of them getting some percentage share of that total spend that they've helped drive, rather than the only way they can make money is by upselling me on another ticket or forcing me to buy merch, which I might not want to buy because I'm actually not an Inter Milan fan and I support Spurs, right? So Yeah, it stuck out to me that there should be some way where when you're booking, you could like cite your reason for visiting, and then if your reason for visiting is because of the Inter Milan match, or as soon as I buy my ticket, like I have to put in my postcode, like Inter Milan know that my postcode's in the UK, like it could prompt me like, hey, do you already have plans on how you're going to get to us? If not, like, would you want to book through booking.com, and you'll get 5% off, and we also take a 5% like commission or whatever on the booking. Like there must be something that could be done. Maybe there's no incentive for the travel platforms to do that because the clubs aren't asking. Maybe there's something else to it that I'm just not aware of, but it feels like there should be more. And I think Expedia does have some club partnerships, like with Arsenal and Liverpool, where maybe they do go into this more granular detail, but on a broader scale, I'm not sure what it currently exists.
There's the conversation around traveling to city for game and team missing out on a lot of other purchases and while still being the main reason they're going. And then there's also the whole other side of just instead of, I'm trying to think of the right way to say it, but like almost more participation based tourism. So like to your example of like a padel or paddle tournament ahead of the Australian Open, like maybe there's organized 5-a-side pickup ahead of big games that you sign up for €10 a ticket around, and it's like a branded Inter Milan mini pitch or something. And like, not that you're going to travel just because there's also a 5-a-side match to play, but there just feels like there's a lot of opportunity to capitalize on the intent to which I'm going to said city for team that then misses out on a lot of other aspects of that trip.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one interesting announcement in that space is Como Football Club announced their own tourism company called Scent Tourism. And as part of that, I think you can buy packages that include like a boat trip on the lake and like visiting the villas and all these other kind of like hospitality things that kind of would be things that you would do if you're going to Como, as well as also attending a football match. So that's one example. I think there's probably other clubs that do look at kind of those packages, but to your point, I think there's a lot more opportunity to extend kind of those packages. And it is kind of the same theme as the conference one, right? Like it's all about like, how do you extend your programming outside of the 90 minutes or the event so that you're able to capture more of that attention. And it's not necessarily about making people spend more. It's just about like capturing more of the spend that's maybe already happening anyway, which is where I quite like it. Because I think a lot of the time with sports business, it's like, how do we squeeze more money out of this person? And so if there's opportunities where it's like not actually squeezing more out, but we're just more efficient with kind of getting more share out of what we've helped create, then I think that's like a really positive thing.
1,000%. Honestly, pretty good. And we didn't even talk about it beforehand, but pretty good related to pitches. I don't even know what my pitch was, but it's an opening conversation, I'd say.
Yeah. I think there's so many opportunities within tourism. There's probably like 10, 15 ideas that could come tangentially out of that. And also
the Como one is a great example, though, because a team, you're going to have to either partner, like teams aren't capable of standing up a tourism agency unless you are intentional about it, like Como was, and you staff that and create a resource able to do it.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of cities where there's a lot of tourism happening anyway, but there's opportunities for them to basically just like pick out the things that are special, right? Like I think about this, like if I was going to Munich, like I want to go to a Bayern Munich themed Bavarian bar, like
exactly. And you can show, maybe your ticket has a discount code to a bunch of partner bars or something, and you get maybe you get a Bayern Munich branded Stein when you're at one of them, or etc. Like there's a bunch of things that you could extend your team brand in just the city in general.
Yeah, and same with pretty much every city on the planet, right? Like there's something that's going to make that city unique. So you just have to figure out what it is. Obviously, for a club like Como, it's a bit more obvious where the tourism element of it kind of comes to play. But with most cities, maybe there's a few exceptions, but with most cities, there's going to be something that they can attract, or something that they can encourage you to do while you're there outside of the game, that will make your experience kind of more full.
We don't need to go into it yet, but that was fascinating to me. And I've thought about sports-based tourism a lot recently. So I saw that article and I was like, oh, this is a good thing to begin to broach the subject.
Both ideas, I guess, are about like, how do you drive more value out of someone's physical experience? Like if someone is physically attending your event, how do you drive more value out of that experience? Like, how do you create complementary experiences and opportunities and entertainment that mean that when they're there, they're going to have a better time?
But not even that. It even starts before that. It's how do you capture and know about the intent of someone traveling to you for you being the reason, and then capture more of that intent. Mm-hmm. To your point, Inter Milan didn't know that you're traveling from the UK.
Yeah. Well, they did. Well, they would have had the data somewhere in their system, but they didn't have a way of flagging and properly reacting to that information.
Yeah.
Which would be the same, I guess, for a lot of people attending something like the Vegas Grand Prix, right? Like, I'm assuming a lot of people are coming from out of town when it comes to something like that.
Or the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's really good. Okay. That's great. I love it.
But then, now you've got me thinking about other things. I'm like, with Spurs, for example, we get a lot of Korean fans come because of Son, or maybe not anymore. Maybe they're all go to LA now. But but they did all come to Spurs. And then I'm just thinking, like, if you know which country someone's coming from, then could you have different packages based on the culture of the people coming, right? Because, like, what Koreans want to do when they come to London is probably different to what someone from the US wants to do when they come to London, potentially, right? Like, there might be different points of interest within the city, and in terms of restaurants and in terms of culture, that matter to them. So, like, how do you tap into them in different ways? But then it ultimately comes back to how much data are you collecting, and then how can you best leverage that data with either partners or with businesses that you could stand up kind of outside of the football club or the sports entity itself.
And is that better accomplished via partnerships or the Como internal model, et cetera?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're not going to go own and acquire a bunch of bars around your city or whatever, but you can certainly create more attractive reasons for fans to go somewhere that you then get a piece of that pie.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking a club needs to go and acquire a lot of bars across their city.
I mean, listen, it wouldn't be a bad idea.
That's another pitch episode down the line.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, bar is just always the easy one. What else would you want to do that you can show your footprint as a team around the city? Maybe there's like a walking tour with a former player and you're just learning the city. And maybe you could do that. You could do a bar crawl. You could do, maybe there's like, this is kind of a wacky and crazy example, but you head to one of those places where you make your own glasses or art or whatever, and you get to create a ceramic coaster or something with the team logo. You get to bring that home. Something. If you sat down and thought about it in your city, there's both city agnostic and a ton of city specific things that you can sort of imprint your brand upon, especially for people that you know are seeking it out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now if anyone's listening, they just need to know that wherever Drew goes on holiday, he's always doing a bar crawl, because it's an example every time. So if Drew's in the city, you need to go for a pint with him, because he's clearly...
Absolutely. That's the easy answer.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll come.
There's a reason Drew helped me take the social clubs to international territory.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. There's just drinking is the common denominator.
He needed
God.
an excuse. He needed an excuse to go for a beer. He's like, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah. Do I get to go to the pub? Yeah. Why not?
I mean, yeah. What's wrong with a beer or two, especially now? End of summer. Can't believe I'm saying that, but
We'll call that a wrap for episode 1 of the pitch. If people have opinions or thoughts, then they can drop us an email or a comment or message us on the WhatsApp group. There's lots of ways to get in touch. So, and if they have ideas as well, like that they want to pitch themselves, then feel free to throw ideas at us that we can either relay to one another or even potentially have some of you on as guests on the podcast to kind of pitch your own ideas. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this first episode and lots more to come.
Super excited. And I just reiterate everything you say. God, I won't put words in your mouth. I certainly don't know a lot about a lot. So whenever I spew something that is probably inaccurate, I am very happy to be told otherwise. But in the meantime, I'm just super excited to get this going.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll let you enjoy your long weekend now. So have a good one.
Awesome, man. We will talk very soon. And yeah, let's get another one on the book soon.
Cool.
This episode of The Pitch was produced by O6.